And hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mysterious Galaxy virtual event. I am Nick, your digital marketer and director of events for the store. Tonight, we are here with author Brian Farrey for his newest book, which came out yesterday. Happy belated book birthday, The Counterclockwise Heart.
Yay!
Now, Brian is a two-time winner of the Minnesota Book Award and the 2017 recipient of the McKnight Fellowship in Children's Literature. How are you doing tonight, Brian?
I am doing fabulous. I am, believe it or not, awake at 9:00 p.m. here in Minnesota. Usually that's not always a guarantee, but I said I've been hearing about Mysterious Galaxy for a long time. I have to see what this is all about. And so I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're fabulous too, just like you.
Yay!
For everyone who is joining us and haven't yet bought your own copy of The Counterclockwise Heart, great job, because you can click the button below, and with your purchase of any one of Brian's books, you will get a signed book plate from him through us. Weird workaround that I'm saying. Blah, blah. Words are hard.
It's magic.
It's magic. If you have any questions that you would like to ask Brian later on in the program, go ahead and click the Ask a Question link below and submit your question, and I will be asking those later. Hello, Kai. Hello, Matthew. Mark and Pam, thanks for joining us. I think the first thing we have to talk about, Brian, is tell us about your book, which we're celebrating the day after its book release.
And it's never too late to celebrate. 3 days later, a week later, keep celebrating me and my book. I will be. If you don't, I've got to. Okay, so we'll talk about The Counterclockwise Heart. This is, depending on your math, my 6th book or my 10th. I wrote 4 books under a pen name. No, I'll never tell you what that was.
Dang it.
My very first book was a young adult contemporary novel called With or Without You. That was a Stonewall Honor book. That was like right out of the gate for me. Awesome. I then wrote a middle grade fiction trilogy for HarperCollins, which included The Vengekeep Prophecies, The Shadowhand Covenant, and The Grimjinx Rebellion. Then after that, I wrote a standalone fantasy for Algonquin called The Secret of Dreadwillow Carse. And this is another book, another standalone for Algonquin, The Counterclockwise Heart. It is not in any way a sequel to Dreadwillow Carse, but I do think of it as kind of a spiritual companion that they touch on some of the same issues. I realized when I was writing this, I was like, didn't I cover this in the last book? And I realized I didn't really, because I still had more to say about specifically the topic of mothers. So this was an attempt to address more of my thoughts on mothers and how awesome they are. Quick synopsis. I'm terrible at doing my quick synopsis, but here we go. It's set in a kind of fairy tale land. It's got a Germanic flavor to it called Rheinvelt. And we follow a couple different characters. There's Alphonsus, who as a baby was discovered hidden in the walls of the imperial castle. And they raised him as their son, and now he's this really intelligent young man, known for his compassion. And another character is a young girl named Esme. She is one of the Hierophants, which are the people who wield magic in this land. However, years ago, the Hierophants fled. No one knows why. She has come back to Rheinvelt on a special mission. She's been super trained in magic. She's the best of the best, and she's got a very important job to do now that she's back in Rheinvelt. Of course, it wouldn't be much of a story if their paths didn't cross. Their paths cross. It involves a statue called the Onyx Maiden, which is this massive 2-story statue of a woman bearing a sword and a flail, and she looks like she wants to kill everybody. It just mysteriously appeared one day. Nobody knew where it was from, but people thought this can't be a good thing. So they both kind of have this goal that involves the Onyx Maiden, and they both kind of have to figure out who they really are. Through the course of the book, they both come to realize that things they were told growing up aren't necessarily the same as things they experience and things that they hear about later on in life. And so they kind of have to come to the idea that, wow, I'm going to have to make some decisions on my own. I can't rely on what I've been told my whole life.
And I have to say, one of the first striking things with your books I've noticed is those titles. Did you have, were you the one that actually entitled them, or was it all publicist, or?
Every title of my books was my title, except, well, my first book, With or Without You, that was my title too, but it was because the publishers wanted it changed from the original one, which I didn't blame them at all. I figured it was going to be the first thing to go. But yeah, in the end, I came up with all the titles.
That's awesome. And they kind of have that same feel to them, that obviously the same person has done them. And the second thing I noticed, the striking book covers, a lot of work went into the covers, but this one, it is so beautiful. I agree with you, Damayanti, so beautiful. Did you have any say with this, or what was this?
Okay, so my two books with Algonquin, Dread Willow Karst, and this one, what happened was the editor sent me some kind of samples. Here are some people we're thinking about. What do you think about these? And I said, oh, I really like this one. And they said, great, we like that one. Okay, you're footing the bill, go for it. But I've absolutely adored every single piece of cover art that has adorned any of my books. This one was by a wonderful young woman named Rovina Kai. Google her, look her up, and just fall in love with her. I mean, this is like child's play compared to some of the other things. I love it. I'm not insulting it. I love it, Rovina. You're fantastic. But she's just an amazing artist, and she's really good at doing kind of spooky middle grade stuff. Kind of, I don't want to say it's Edward Gorey-esque, but it's kind of those long lines and shadows. It's just It's fantastic. So when they sent me the first rendition of this, my jaw hit the floor. And I said, oh my God, yes, that's perfect. And they're like, well, this is just a sketch. Just a sketch. I mean, it was in full color. It was, if I showed you the sketch, it's almost identical to this. I had to put them side by side to really see the difference. But I was like, for a sketch, it was incredibly detailed. And I just said, yep, that's it. Put that on my book right now, please.
Oh my gosh, wonderful. And it totally fits your book with its darker themes too. So yes.
Dark themes, me? No.
So one of the obviously, and you had mentioned it, you have Germanic folk tales and inclusion of German words. What's the story behind that?
I wish there was a really good story behind it. There isn't any more than I knew this was going to have a very strong fairy tale theme. And I meant like the old fairy tales, the scary ones, before Walt Disney got his hands on them, scary fairy tales. And for me, so many of those are Brothers Grimm and Germanic in origin. So I just kind of wanted to give this land a flavor of that. It's not Germany, it's not old Bavaria. It's its own little fantasy land, but I definitely wanted to have that Germanic influence in there, because I think that, that and German's such a beautiful language anyway. And it's kind of got a strictness to it. And I really wanted that to prevail throughout the book.
Now, is Rheinveld, when you discussed the setting of the book, is it inspired by any real life places?
It's not, but when I imagine I'm going to forget the name. There's a very famous castle in Germany, starts with an N. I'm going to forget the name. But whenever I picture the Imperial Castle, that's the castle I picture in my head.
Is that the one that's like on a high mountaintop?
Yeah, and it's got this winding road that goes up to it.
Yes,
and trees. Yeah, it's N-E-U.
David says it's
there we go.
There
it is.
I butcher words. Yes, that one.
I knew somebody was going to get it. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, I love seeing that castle every time in The Amazing Race.
Yeah. Other than that, it wasn't inspired necessarily by any particular place.
And with this Clockwork Heart element, I have to also ask you, did you have any inspirations from steampunk novels. I know TV show wise, you probably have a little bit of Doctor Who in your work because your bio screams you love Doctor Who a little bit.
There are Doctor Who references everywhere if you know where to look for them in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the funny thing was the element of the clock came from old fairy tales. It wasn't necessarily steampunk, and that was my greatest fear when I first started talking to my publisher about the cover. I said there cannot be any clocks or cogs on this. People will think it's steampunk, and it's not. Still found a review today that called it steampunk, but whatever. As soon as you put a clock in, they're like, "Oh, it's steampunk." Well, anyways, so there's a fairy tale about, and I'm gonna get the name wrong. A woman whose hands are cast in iron.
Oh.
And it's magical. And so I kind of wanted something like, okay, you don't have a heart anymore. You now have a clock. And I just kind of liked the imagery there, like, and because the thing is about, I forgot to mention, Alphonsus is the one who has a clock in his chest. He doesn't know where it came from. Nobody knows where it came from. But despite not having a heart there, he is the most compassionate and kindest person there is. So I just kind of wanted to just bring that idea of like, okay, so where is this compassion coming from if it's not necessarily his heart?
With me, it seemed like I was getting strong Wizard of Oz vibes, like a reverse Tin Man.
Because I had not thought of that. I'll take that though.
Thank you. I'm going to take that.
It's the reverse Tin Man, of course. You must obviously see reverse Tin
Man. Now you also have a background in theater. Do you think that has lent to your writing in any sense, drawing from that experience?
It does, in that I like to read things aloud, and so I get to have fun doing different voices, and then I also get to figure out how I need to reword things because I'm like, oh, that's a mouthful. I have to. Nobody would really say that combination of words together. So yeah, I think it helps me as I've done some playwriting and some screenwriting. I'm very used to doing dialogue, so I think it kind of helps my dialogue skills a bit when I'm writing them in my books.
That sounds very interesting. Like it gives you an opportunity to not cosplay. I don't know why it's cosplay, but to basically be your characters, to step in them more because of the theater background, like, and actually act them out. And like, wait a minute, no, he wouldn't say this, or he wouldn't say it like this. That's really good.
That's exactly what happens.
And you've also done a stint as a bookseller and a book publicist. So how has that really, how have you integrated that into your writing overall? Because I imagine it's probably played a little bit into it.
Well, I pretty much have been in the book world for the last 15 years or so. I was a book publicist for a few years, bookseller first, then a book publicist, and then I was an acquiring editor for a young adult imprint for 7 years. And what I like to think about in terms of what that does for my writing is, they always say that writers should read widely. You might be a fan of just steampunk romance novels, let's say, pulling that out of the air. And it's great. Go read your steampunk romance novels, but read other things too. You're going to get such a better idea of the world and the way people think. And so between the book selling, the book publicist, and the acquiring editor, I got exposed to so many different types of ideas that I might not have had that exposure to if I hadn't put myself in that situation. I might have just stuck to reading, whatever my current favorite book was at the time, as opposed to really opening up my mind and letting all these other influences join me in my writing.
Have there been any specific books that you can point to that have really inspired your writing, or any of your books in particular?
Ooh. One of my favorite I'm going to name a couple books and authors. Jonathan Stroud wrote the Bartimaeus trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have not read that, actually, if you have not read it, go get the audiobooks because the audiobooks are amazing. They're read by Simon Jones, who was the original Arthur Dent in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Side note, but he's really good. And the Bartimaeus books just the way he uses language, and he changes from third person to first, and the difference is palpable. A couple other authors I like. I'm going to mention them, and you're going to be like, "Oh, well, they're your friends," but yeah, they're my friends. But they're also authors I really love. Kelly Barnhill and Anne Ursu have influenced what I write a lot in terms of they've kind of shown me what's possible. There are times like, "Oh, I can't do that. Can I?" And they go, "Oh, well, Anne did that. Sure, I can do it." Those are the ones who leap to mind in terms of. I mean, there are so many writers I love, and I think I steal a little bit from everybody, like any good writer. But those are the three I can think of that, especially recently, have been really influencing the way I think and the way I approach my writing.
Excellent. And yeah, I think they always say the best form of flattery is, was it mimicry? No, I'm really bad with this.
I know it's yeah. Imitation is the best form.
Imitation,
something like that.
Imitation is the best form of flattery.
Yeah,
and I think that's
all writers steal, and the ones who tell you they don't are lying. It's that.
Yeah, it's because it's pretty much you just consume as much as possible, and then bring out a new lovely device from what you have consumed.
Exactly.
Now, your books, especially this new one, the Counterclockwise Heart, you do, even though you said you didn't, deal with some darker themes, sadness, death, grief, a lot of things we wouldn't normally think of when we think of middle grade books. What is it about that motivates you to include for middle grade?
First of all, it always surprises me when people say, "That's not what a middle grade book is." And then, of course, I have to say, "Did you read Harry Potter?" There is death all over them books.
Agreed, yes.
Although we do not say her name anymore. But yeah, when people say, "Oh, that's not what middle grade books are," I'm like, "You're not reading the right middle grade books." I mean, the middle grade books that I can think of, going back to my childhood, Bridge to Terabithia, that dealt with death. There was this book that traumatized me as a kid called, I want to say it was A Taste of Blackberries. It's about a kid who dies from a bee sting.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I mean, it's there. It's always been there. And I think the only reason now people are going, why are we doing dark things with the kids? I'm like, there's darker stuff on TV than is in my book. I promise you that. I hope the thing is, a lot of times when there's dark stuff on TV, it's like it's there for the shock value. If I'm going to go dark in my book, it's because there's something to think about here. There's something I want you to consider. I'm not saying I'm being didactic. I'm just saying this is stuff. I mean, a lot of this is stuff that middle grade kids already know. I mean, middle grade, we're generally talking age 8 to 12. And as much as we want to think they're innocent little babes, that's just not the case anymore in 2022. Some of them are innocent babes, but they know a lot. They're smart. Our kids are smart, and they are faced with a world that is getting darker by the day. I hate to say that. I'm sorry. I tend to be an optimist, but there's just dark stuff happening every single day. And so I don't think there's anything in my book that, if anything, maybe somebody's going to read my book and get the tools they need to get past some of the darkness.
David says A Taste of Blackberries, Doris Buchanan Smith, maybe?
That might be it. I was too young to read it because I was traumatized. Mm-hmm. I had to, I'm embarrassed to say this. I had to hide it under the bed. I was so scared of that book.
Oh.
Dead kids? No. Because it was a kid about my age. And I was like, no, hate this book. But that might have been it.
But I completely agree. There are actually a lot of books in what is now known as the middle grade genre that have those themes. And I think it's twofold. I think it's one, parents really don't actively look for darker themed books, or they want to protect little Billy Bob, whatever. Sorry. And so those are the books they rather would avoid. We can bring up the recent rulings about Mouse in Tennessee with protecting her children. But I think it's partly that. And also, I agree, our childhood, middle grade really wasn't its own genre. It only became a thing in the last decade or so. The books were there, and like we knew kids read them, but it wasn't exactly middle grade. I think one of my favorite books in middle grade is Neil Gaiman's Coraline, and that is dark as heck. And,
the Graveyard Book too. The Graveyard Book starts with murder.
Yes, and it has blood and a knife.
I know. But the other thing is, your book has dark themes. Well, let's talk about what's not dark too. Let's talk about that. There's a lot of love in this book. There's a lot about compassion and empathy, and they're all intertwined with the dark stuff. They're very yin and yang. And so when people say, "Well, these are dark books," I'm like, but you're focusing on that. You're not focusing on, what the characters go through, what they overcome, what they have to learn in order to get from emotional point A to emotional point B, and grow as people. I mean, that's what the coming of age story is all about. It's when you kind of take that step toward not being that young person you were anymore. And I think that outweighs any kind of dark theme when you get kids in books who are advancing in their intellect and in their emotions.
I mean, you really touched upon it. I think middle grade, even though it is entertaining, should be there to help children prepare for life, because there are going to be a lot of dark points, but then you also balance it with the more lighter sides, the happy sides of it. So definitely, I agree. And you had also touched upon this character development. So your characters, your book has been praised for having wonderful character development and growth that you've shown. How was writing that? Like, how did you develop to make these characters grow on the page?
Well, when I was talking about emotional point A and emotional point B, that's kind of where I start. I mean, who is this person and who are they going to become? Mm-hmm. That's the easy part. Then it's figuring out how they get there. For Esme starts the book very headstrong, very independent, doesn't think she needs anybody, thinks she knows everything she needs. And the adventures that come along begin to demonstrate to her that maybe that's not completely true. And Alphonsus starts in a place where he begins to lets his fear overcome his compassion. He starts out very compassionate, but he lets his fear take over, and it does so much to motivate his actions throughout the book. And he makes some poor choices as a result of listening to his fear. So once I knew where they were started and how they had to get there, then I took each of them separately and kind of plotted out an emotional journey. And then I figured, okay, but there's got to be a point where they intersect. And that was actually the hardest chapter I had to write, because I had to figure out, okay, this is where they both kind of got to look at each other and say, we're not that unlike after all. And so that was a chapter I worked on really hard.
What lessons have you learned from writing your previous books up until this one that really helped you with the Counterclockwise Heart?
The lesson I learned from writing my trilogy is don't write trilogies. I say that as someone who is not a full-time writer. I think if I were a full-time writer, I would tackle another series, but series are hard. I mean, I know they're popular. People love them. I loved writing mine, but it was hard, especially when you're looking at an arc over 3 books, then each book has to have its own little arc. And oh my gosh, that's what I learned from that, is don't write series unless you're a full-time writer.
I can only imagine how many editors are going, no, don't say that.
Shut up, off. If you can do it and you're a part-time writer, more power to you. It just about killed me. I think on a more positive spin, things that I've learned that I kind of put into here. I think it really was focusing on that emotional journey. I can look at my body of work and kind of see myself evolve in terms of figuring out the nuance of moving the characters emotionally, kind of like, chess, how I move them around, get them and they to where they need to be. So I think that's what I took most from the book, because I think I learned a little bit more about what makes the characters tick and how to motivate them.
Now, I know there's a difference in maturity level between middle grade and young adult. So With or Without You, you mentioned, was your young adult debut. Mm-hmm. What would you say is the difference, other than the maturity level, with writing middle grade versus a young adult?
That is such a controversial topic.
Oh, no.
I mean, not just me, but within the writing world. Mm. Some people will tell you that middle grade will use an easier syntax. There's like Lexile scores for readability and difficult. But if you read those Jonathan Stroud books, they are very rich in lexicon and grammar, and they're beautiful. And then there are books that back off on that a little bit. And I think those, like, you look at something like, I don't think the Magic Treehouse qualifies as middle grade. I think we call that chapter books, and that's a little bit different too. That's a little bit lower on the line. But I think the main difference is, as you said, marketing. We market middle grade books to age 12-year-olds. I just remembered something too. We were talking about, I said, there was darkness in books I read. Do you know when I was in 5th grade, what the girls were reading? Flowers in the Attic.
No.
In 5th grade.
No.
Oh, there's no. I mean, that's not a kid's book. That's not a middle grade book at all. But that's what they were reading. And now we want to protect them from the witches in my book. No, protect them from Flowers in the Attic.
Are there any other genres that you would love to write for in the future?
What I'm working on right now, and I'm guessing will be the next thing I finish, is actually an adult sci-fi comedy. Having a lot of fun with that, which is funny because all my life people say, "What inspired you to write?" I'm like, Star Wars, man. I saw Star Wars in its original release, 1977, and it blew my mind. And you think, oh, that's why Brian's a sci-fi writer. Brian hasn't written a lick of sci-fi, at least nothing that he's published. But this is the one I'm pretty sure I'm going to get done and off to my agent. The thing is, I have ADHD. And so I always tell people I write what my brain tells me to write. I've usually got several things started and I'll write on this one a little bit, and then I'll write on this one and this one. And eventually it's like a horse race where one will start to take the lead, and then I can focus my brain on just finishing that one. And that's why I'm saying I'm pretty sure my sci-fi comedy is what's next, because it's the one I'm the furthest along in right now.
As one of my family members, more my older aunts would say, "Oh, you creative types."
We're
just doing your thing. Lastly, for me, was there anything from the Counterclockwise Heart that you wish made it into the final draft and you worked hard on, but ultimately made it on the cutting room floor?
I can answer that for just about every book I've written except this one.
That just means everything you wanted and more made it into the book.
I think so, because I can think of the thing is the third book in my trilogy, the Grimjinx Rebellion. There was a chapter I wrote that I cut because it was just taking too darn long, and I refashioned it into The Secret of Dreadwillow Karst, sort of, kind of. So I'm a big, anything I cut, I keep because I might work it in somewhere, but I can't think of anything that, I think everything mainly it was stuff that was added. My editor encouraged me to add, and she was 100% right. There were times, things might have been confusing, and I had to go in and add some clarity. But I can't think of anything I cut from this that isn't in the final version.
Well, I think cutting and reusing is just what the kids call these days as upcycling. So you're just an upcycler.
Ooh, upcycling. Yes. I'm an upcycler. What can I say?
Hi, DJ. I missed your hello in the chat. All right. I think it is that time where we finally pull from our audience questions. Are you ready, Brian?
I am ready. I am now hydrated.
Got to get the lips moist for all those answers again. All right.
La, la, la. Ready.
Perfect.
Hit me.
Our first one from the audience is, if you had to spend a day with your protagonist, would you get along, and what would you do together? So you have two different points of view, Esme and Alphonsus. So I guess which one of them would you hang out with, and would you get along?
And don't forget Guntram. I definitely wouldn't hang out with Guntram.
Oh, yeah.
We don't talk about Guntram. Little Encanto reference for you fans.
I was gonna no, you just restarted the song in my head.
Good. Little room for you. Oh man, I would hang out with Alphonsus, no problem, because he is very chill. He's very happy, and we have a lot of the same fears, so we could talk about that. We could rap about the things that scare us in life. I think I would be intimidated by Esme because she's so headstrong and I know what I'm doing and this and that. She's got a soft core. It takes a while. We get there. But just initially hanging out with her would be, I mean, when these two, when Alphonsus and Esme meet, he's all, hey, great to meet a friend. And she's like, can we just get this over with? And so that's what I would be. I would be trying to crack her rough exterior, and she would just be like, no, thank you, not having it.
Love it. Thank you very much, Damayanti, for that question.
Thank you.
Next, what is a question you have always wished someone would ask you about your book? And will you answer that question for us now? Inquiring minds want to know. What would you want people to ask you?
What would I want people to ask me? There are things I get asked. I get asked, like, are there any Doctor Who references in there? And I'll say, yeah, but you got to find them. I ain't telling you where they are. And some of them are obscure, let me tell you that.
Some
of them are lines of dialogue from a 1982 episode. But anyway, a question I wished I was asked. You've asked me about the... I guess I'd like to be asked about. There's a magical relic in the book called an infinitum box, and I would love for somebody to say, where did the idea from the infinitum box come from? I'm glad you asked. So, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that Esme, the magic user, comes into possession of a small box, which is a Hierophant relic. And when you open the lid, you can ask it a question, and it will give you two answers. One is true, and one is a lie. Ooh. So obviously, it doesn't work on a yes or no question. You got to give it a question where you have to narrow things down, and then you've got to make your own choice on what you think is right. And so I created that because I needed Esme to realize she had to rely on more than her own magic. She's, like I said, she's very smart. She thinks magic can get her out of anything, and using the box to figure out a number of mysteries kind of forces her to say, wow, magic's not going to help me with this one. I got to figure it out on my own. So that's where that came from.
Gives her a little bit of self-reliance.
Exactly.
What a good device. Yes, literary, actual device and a device.
Actual device. Yeah. Works on two levels there.
What is your process for creating the rules of your magic systems? Is there anything you try to include or avoid in them?
When I write the last two books, this one and Dreadful Cars, have both been fairy tale-ish. I mentioned my friend Kelly Barnhill, who has written The Girl Who Drank the Moon, which was a Newbery winner a couple years ago.
Yes.
The Witch's Boy. And we did a book event once where we were talking about magic, and we talked about how a lot of magic in books falls into two categories, which is one, it's like Harry Potter, where it's just used all the time. There's no consequence. You can just use magic.
Mm-hmm.
The other more fairy tale type magic is there's a price, there's a cost, there's something that's got to happen. And I kind of embraced that whole hog with this book, especially in that when magic is used, there's something called a balance where you use magic, but then magic uses you and does something. One example is Esme is given these charms that will protect her on her journey. But the balance is that whenever anybody asks her a question, she has to tell the truth. So the balance, and the balance is, it's always seemingly random. You never quite know what it's going to be, but it changes with everything. And I think that's a good way to keep magic from becoming like the solution to everything. And we just snap our hands and Thanos, and we're all gone. There's a price for magic, and so that's what really was my inspiration for this, was kind of going back to some of the original fairy tale magic.
Man, I love that. I am a big fan also of, even though we think magic doesn't have rules, you know what, it does.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the magic with rules. Thank you very much for that question. What was your favorite piece of research for this book that didn't get included? Well, and I know you said that nothing really didn't hit the cutting room floor. So I guess just in terms of your research period for any of your books, was there any sort of research you did and you thought, oh, that was great, and just didn't ultimately make it into any one of your books?
When I was doing my research, there was a lot I could have told you about 16th century clocks. Because there was I guess that was something that got cut, but that got cut because it was stupid. But I had a long description once about the clock and what it looked like and how it worked. And it was.
And do you think that's just because? Do you think that's just because the audience would be like, I don't care about the inner workings of a clock? Or...
Yes. And that's, any author will tell you that's the biggest challenge, is working research in a way that's very organic and not, look at all the research I did. There was a lengthy description of the clock, and I pulled that. I mean, I pulled that out even before I sent this to my editor. I said, no, that's boring, out. And I've since forgotten all my 16th century clock knowledge, so I can't tell you any of it. A clock's a clock at this point for me.
And I think that is a thing where you just get so proud of some weird factoid or thing that you've learned that I must make sure everyone knows about it. And so whether you're actually telling someone, did you know, you'll insert it into the book, and like, readers, did you know? And then your proofreaders or editor will be like, okay, what the heck was this about? Why would you include this?
I got to tell you, my copy editor was really good at finding the Doctor Who stuff.
It's very off topic, but it's like in the movie Death Becomes Her, where the author, not Death Becomes Her. Oh, no. It's but same actress. It's She-Devil. And the author character in that one has a whole chapter on washing, on using the washing machine. And the editor's like, what was that about? Off topic, yes. Thank you very much for that question. Would this book be okay for third graders, 8 and 9 years old? Thank you, DJ. DJ is a teacher, so perfect question.
Hi, DJ. Absolutely. I am one that's always, you should read it first, and then you can make the judgment on whether you. I don't want it burned or anything, please. But there's nothing ultra violent in here. Like I said, there's scarier stuff on TV right now than is in this book, and I think this this deals with a lot of, I mean, it deals with death of a parent. It deals with grief. And I think, kids of that age have already started to figure that stuff out. So I think when they can see that in other characters, we're always talking about representation and how important that is, that kids can see themselves in books. I think the characters here, the kids can easily see themselves in situations they've been in.
And we definitely talked about that earlier. I think DJ came a little late. And I think also children, there are certain things that adults are afraid of, but that's only because we have been through just living life. Unfortunately, we get tired and we gotten used to these things, and we learned to be fearful. And children, for the most part, are very fearless. I'm going to jump off a roof, like that kind of deal. And so I think there's also certain things in books that will just be like over their head when it comes to like, I should be afraid of this. And it will allow them to get to introduce some of those ideas that you're trying to plant in there. So yes.
In my last book, in Dreadful Curse, I think if I may preen myself from one, my favorite thing that I've ever written was a line in that book where a mother is telling her daughter, parents only ever lie to their kids to protect them. I have yet to see it work. Because, the lies aren't going to protect forever, and kids are going to figure things out, and they jump headlong into things so often, like you say.
Yes, totally. Thank you very much for that one. And then lastly, what is the biggest challenge writing for a middle grade audience?
Oh boy. For me personally, it's that I do tend to get a bit of a little prim and proper with I write long sentences. They're grammatically correct. You can sentence diagram them until the cows come home, and they're brilliant, but nobody wants to read a sentence that lasts 4 lines. So I gotta keep an eye on that, because again, that's one thing where I know for a fact that there are 10-year-olds out there who crave those 4-line sentences. I was one of them. I love the fancy language or purple prose. But I really have to be careful with when I'm writing middle grade, because I can get too. And so I got to say, okay, Brian, you're 12. Would you like this? Nope. Okay, let's reword it.
Yes, Matt. Very German. How very German. And I think that also goes back into the theater experience you've had, where you can therefore put yourself into a certain mindset. I'm like, okay, you know what? Would this really work? So you have mentioned that you're also working on a sci-fi book, an adult sci-fi book. Is there anything more you can talk about that other than it being a comedy? Title, anything?
I'll tell you the title. It's
Yes.
Star Words.
Star Words?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. I don't know what I can tell you about the story, other than I'll say this much. It's about an MFA graduate who learns that his student loans have been bought by an alien corporation. And things happen as a result.
And then things ensue. Yes.
Yeah. Hijinks and all sorts of sci-fi things.
Oh, excellent. Perfect. And we're out of questions, but Brian, this has been a wonderful chat with you.
Thank you. This has been great.
Yes. Where can people find you on the social medias so they can see what you're doing?
On the social media, Twitter, I am at Brian Farrey. Pretty simple, all one word.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, I'm a little fancier. I'm at Brian Farrey Latz. Same thing with an Latz at the end, which is my married name. I don't have Facebook. Anybody who tells you they're me on Facebook is a liar. I haven't figured out Snapchat or TikTok. I enjoy watching TikToks. I just have nothing to contribute. So it's mainly, and my website is brianfarreybooks.com.
Very good. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. and celebrating the counterclockwise heart.
Thank you for coming, everybody. I appreciate it so much. And
And
thank
don't
you
forget-
again to Mysterious Galaxy. I love you guys.
Oh, thank you, Brian, and thank you so much for doing this with us. If you haven't already, guys and gals and everyone else, go ahead and below and buy the Counterclockwise Heart. You will get a signed book plate for that, and any one of other Brian's books. We have those all linked on our website there. Follow Brian, and we will see you hopefully at our next event. And have a good night, everyone. And have a good night,
Good
Brian.
night. Good night.
Bye.